CAFE CLIL 9, Supporting Talking in Content Subjects, recorded on the 11th of December 2009.
It's okay.
We've got a very broad agenda, really. We had the last discussion about the skill of reading within content subjects in foreign languages, and that was very interesting. And so we thought we'd do another skill, and we'd discuss talking and speaking skills in content. And I imagine you've had a look at the pages I uploaded to the Fact World site from it's a UK geography book for 11 to 14-year-olds. And what I thought we could do is maybe we could just simply share some ideas about the kind of talking we use in our classrooms, and then we can broaden it a little bit after we've shared a few ideas and talk about some principles, because one of the things that occurs to me is that a lot of these native speaker textbooks, like this one is, tend to be quite text heavy. You know, they have quite a lot of text in the books, but not a lot of ideas for talking. So I think anything we can come up with in terms of a list of principles and suggestions will be very useful. So would anybody like to make a start? You know, just generally what sort of speaking they can describe that goes on in their classrooms or in their teaching contexts?
Well, as I opened your files, I was very surprised and happy to see that books in Britain are changing from text-based to text picture-based, and from a lot of text to read and to remember and to write down to tasks leading to a small piece of text, as you have here in the first picture. People say that weather around the world is becoming less predictable and so on. And then more than the double text is giving tasks. And I had just yesterday a new book from CLIL Publishers here for year 10, starting secondary 2, that is full of old-fashioned text and some pictures and very small tasks to do. And so I'm happy to see that outside Germany there is an evolution in changing books.
Yeah. And why not in Germany, Egbert?
I think because it seems to be too expensive to have new ideas and to print them out.
Yeah. So you are still working with old prints that are printed again and again. Am I right?
You are right. Traditional books from CLIL, especially, are very old-fashioned and just compilations of previous material and not really stepping in a future structure.
One of the things I would say, Egbert, leader, about particularly this material is it's not that new. I mean, I've had this textbook for probably about 10 years, and the other thing I would say about it is it's geography. And my feeling is, and maybe Ola could make a comment because she's a geographer, I think geography does this kind of thing much better than other subjects. I don't know why that is, but I just have the impression that geography textbooks, as opposed to others, say history or chemistry or biology, they tend to have more focuses on more input from different sources, you know, more visual, more diagrams, more charts, but also text and also task. And Ola, what's your impression about that? Have we lost you, Ola?
No.
Really?
Hey.
Are you there, Alexander?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Oh, right. So, I think that, generally, geography textbooks do tend to have more visuals. But the question is what the teacher does with it. And in regular classes, not bilingual classes, there is a lot of complaint that teachers stopped giving students spoken tasks, even if it is not a bilingual or clear class. That generally students do not talk, and then when it comes to final exams, oral exams, they have difficulties. So yes, there is a lot of visual things. I'm quite sure you cannot imagine a modern geography textbooks without, maps, graphs, and so on. Yeah. But the question is, how the teachers use it, how the teacher use this input. That would be a big concern, really.
Sure. And what would you, I mean, could you say a few words about the kind of speaking you get your students to do in your geography classes, Ola?
Well, I'm a bit of a problem here because I'm both a geographer and a language teacher, and to me it's just quite obvious that there must be speaking. So I would do pair work. I would do group work with tasks to discuss. You know, a typical tasks like think, pair, share, for example. You know, some kind of brainstorming to get some vocabulary, but then discussing this in pairs, and then discussing this in groups, and then discussing this in a class. But that's not because it is in the textbook. That's because I think that's something that should be really done.
I suppose that's got a lot to do with your dual background, hasn't it?
That's it.
You're very familiar with techniques for teaching language, but you're also a geographer, so you can easily combine the two.
And there is another thing that must be done during CLIL classes, and I think regular classes will do it as well a lot. Just ask students to give presentations. Well, this is not the same kind of pair work or group work, but also a chance to deliver a kind of structured and well-organized speech. And some students can do it really pretty well, even in a foreign language.
Yeah, I mean, I agree entirely, but you've already mentioned, I've just made a few notes while you were speaking, you've already mentioned pair work and small group work and whole class speaking, and then presentation work. So there are 4 types of speaking task you've mentioned already that happen in your classrooms. And I think there are other types of speaking that we can talk about. One particular aspect that occurs to me from this material from the textbooks is there are many general guiding questions. And I imagine in the teacher's notes that go with the textbook, I don't have a copy of it, but I imagine there are ideas for the teacher about what to do with those guiding questions. And one thing that occurs to me, if you do geography in another language, is the students might need some help in answering these guiding questions. If the teacher wants them to give an answer in a whole class environment, you know, to show a hand and then answer the question that's on the page, there isn't any language at all in these pages to help the students answer those questions, apart from the language that's in the text. And I wondered if any of you have suggestions about how you support that language. Egbert?
Such a book could be constructed on the one hand as a book with pages, traditional pages, and then with pages to clap outside and to show phrases and some help to works. A book made of let's say three parts, the traditional 2 parts and another to show how to work with language.
Yeah, that sounds really great. I'm sorry. The thing is that Egbert that has just mentioned it, that you can add just some notes for a teacher how to deal with the different language skills like speaking if you've got a traditional textbook. Yeah. But what comes to me is that would be really nice to support a teacher with the text or the textbook that would somehow force the teacher to practice various language skills, including speaking. If the textbook would have a task, discuss it with a partner or share your ideas with a whole group, then this somehow would also force a teacher to introduce this kind of task during the class.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And maybe we could ask Egbert and Lida about Egbert teaches science, chemistry and biology, I believe, Egbert. And,
yeah, right.
And Lida's from a chemistry background.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have experiences of what Ola's talking about? Do your textbooks or your memories of textbooks actually have prompts to the teacher and the students? Now talk about this in pairs, because actually my experience is that you don't really see that kind of task in traditional textbooks.
No, I don't think we have them. But then I must say, in our bilingual education, they only use English textbooks. So, and just the first textbook, which was translated from the Dutch book, has been published. So, they're exactly the same as the normal textbooks, and not special for using in bilingual classes. But from my own experience, I always distinguish two difficulties if you teach in English. And that is one, talking in pairs about a subject needs a lot of subject language that students have to know and have to learn, and you have to teach them. And apart from that, they have to learn it in English. So what I usually do is let them talk in Dutch before they start talking in English, and then, they can find out how they could say things and discuss things in English. Maybe that's not the right way, but for me it works.
Yeah. Sounds really okay.
Yeah, I know Lida, when she said maybe that's not the right way, she said it very easily, but I know for a fact that Lida's a very communicative teacher, so she thinks about speaking a lot when she's thinking about science. But I think it is a very important question, isn't it, Lida, that what do you do with the mother tongue when you set up speaking activities? And maybe we could share some ideas about that. In a moment, I'll write it down and we'll come back to it, mother tongue speaking in pair and group work, because I'd still like to share some more of your ideas about whether your textbooks and your subjects actually, as Ola said, force students to talk in the classroom. Because traditionally, most of the speaking I experience and I observe is teacher questions and student answers. There's very little experimenting with other interactions.
Right. Teachers in Germany, not in general, but those whom I visited in the last month, try to show that they are very good speakers in foreign language. And then they sometimes give an additional information in mother tongue. But normally, if students work in pairs or in groups, most of the students go back to mother tongue and afterwards try to develop an answer for presentation. So there is a great gap for most of the students. And I think one problem is that they don't have the ideas how to tell answers and questions and comments, and they go back to mother tongue to explain the content and do not use the language. And bilingual teaching in Germany is based as a content lesson and not as a language lesson. Also, mostly language teachers do these lessons in content.
Okay, so it looks as if it was the same as in Poland. So these are generally subject teachers who are not language teachers, and these are content lessons.
Yeah.
I don't think there is a big problem if students discussing something turned into their mother tongue. I mean, that's quite natural. That's quite, it's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. As long as they can come up with an answer, this is a very nice situation for peer learning. As long as they can come up with some nice ideas, how to say this in a foreign language, I think this is not a problem. You can, as a teacher, you cannot control all your students talking, and that's it. There is one thing more. I think that in Poland there is a problem that sometimes teachers do not themselves feel confident enough in discussing things. Maybe it's easier for teachers just to, giving a presentation or talking themselves rather than discussing with the students. And there is another big problem with pronunciation. There is some specific vocabulary that is really very difficult to find in the dictionaries. the way how you should say them, like, geographical names. And this makes a problem for both sides, both the students and the teachers, I think.
Yeah. In a way, I suppose, when you talk about lack of confidence in the teachers, that reflects itself in many ways in the classroom, doesn't it? And if the teacher's kind of leading from the front, that's a very safe setup for the teacher, isn't it? To sort of lead from the front and control the class from the front. It's much more risky to give the focus to the students, isn't it? To set up pair work and group work, and there's more risk of them not doing what the teacher wants them to do if they're working on their own in little groups.
Well, this is a general problem, of course, not only for these tasks.
Yeah. And I think, what I was thinking of, Lida, is that if a teacher is not very confident, because you have to be ready to take a risk to let students work on their own.
Yeah.
Maybe we could talk about kind of solutions. Some things come to my mind when, for example, Ola mentioned a nice quotation I've written down: "You can't control all of your students talking." And I wonder if any of you have suggestions for techniques how you can actually, let's say, make your students talk if you need them to talk. Giving them a question is a very simple way to get students to do something, but it's not always the best way, is it, to get them to talk? And I wondered if you had any suggestions about getting them to talk. It's gone quiet now. Does that mean I've lost
Thinking. Thinking.
Well, let me give you an example. I share in some of my workshops a lot of interactive speaking activities. And one simple example I know Egbert's familiar with from Science Across the World and the Association for Science Education materials are question loops, where the students have a piece of information that they can share, and they also have a question that they need to ask, but their answer doesn't go with their question. So they end up having a very interactive loop around the classroom where questions are being asked and students are giving an answer and then asking their question. It goes all the way around the class. That's an example of how you can make your students talk in a very, very mechanical, actually, but very entertaining way. I wondered if you had any other suggestions.
But then only the student there is a risk that only the student who gets the question is thinking about the answer, and all the rest is just sleeping. If I put it very.
Yeah, that's a good point. The idea with the question loop is you don't know what the question is going to be, so you have to listen to see if it's the question that goes with your answer. That's the particular idea there.
I see do it the other way around. Oh, good. Yeah. I didn't understand that straight away.
Another suggestion, and do interrupt me if you have other ideas. Another suggestion I found from an ELT, an English language teaching book for teachers, is something called an information search. And the idea with an information search is students are given a piece of paper with 3 questions and 3 answers, and again their answers don't go with their questions. And somebody else in the classroom has one of the answers to their questions, and it's quite difficult to get your mind around what that looks like on a piece of paper, but actually you have 6 pieces of paper that you copy 5 times for a class of 30, and when you tell the students to go, they all stand up and they have to go and find the answers to their questions. I'll put some examples of these on our webpage on FactWorld so that we can show them and share them as examples from our discussion. But
I'm sorry to be interrupting. This is really an English language teaching idea. When you have people stand up and go around and get some questions, which reminds me of a very simple exercise. Find someone who, and you can turn it into a bingo exercise with walking around and getting people, finding proper people that match with the description that you have. Now, but then it's really difficult for me to imagine subject teachers doing smoothly things like that. I think you really need a little bit of maybe not training, but, confidence and expertise, how to do it, how to manage a group that is walking around, and asking people questions. But that sounds really okay.
Yeah. I mean, I agree entirely, Ola. It's easy for me to describe these activities, but it's another thing to expect a subject teacher who's used to talking from the front of the classroom to completely change the dynamics and offer 10 minutes of what looks like chaos. It's organized chaos, but it still looks like chaos.
But speaking as a science teacher, we do not like normally to lose students in our own activity. We tend to have our experiments, our central picture, our central diagram, and then try to do a lecture and not an inactive circle or such a thing, because most science teachers do not really activities in pairs or in groups. They are all focused on the one thing they are teaching and not things around. And I have some student teachers at the moment with very different subjects, German and biology, are two of them, and they do behave in both of their subjects very, very differently. So in German lessons, they are very free in their structure, and in biology, they tend to open for some suggestions, and then they come back to their own line of thinking, and students are not allowed to think their own way and to argue about things.
And Egbert, are you telling us about biology lessons in German then, or biology lessons in English, or foreign language?
I have two other students with English and biology, and in their biology lesson, they are very strictly lesson teacher, and in their English lessons, they are free to open structures for learning and not only for teaching.
Yeah, but my question was that the lessons in biology, were they taught in English? Was this bilingual education?
Yes, it was two lessons to supervise, and the first one was very strictly biology type in English. And after talking about this, the next visit was with a student teacher. He opened in this bilingual lesson to the structures of language teaching, on not focusing on traditional teaching of biology.
I've heard this comment before, Egbert, not just in Germany, that a teacher who's a bilingual teacher who teaches a subject but also teaches language, they behave very differently in the two classrooms. I don't know why that is, because obviously good methodology is good methodology, isn't it? But
that's too simple, Keith.
Is it too simple? But I have heard that. Well, let me ask you a question then. Can you think of safe ways of getting students to talk? And when I say safe, I mean ways to get students to talk which are not a risk to the teacher. Can you think of ways of doing that?
Yeah, I've just opened Climate 2, the picture of the Titanic.
Yeah.
There are two activities. The first is read the story, identify, and so on. And the second is, was the sinking of Titanic a natural disaster? Discuss this question with a partner. This task, discuss, is a very open task. So if you could lead through structure of a discussion with some phrases included in this activity, then students would go this way you are describing, how to discuss it, and such an advice in a second page here, how to discuss such a question, would be really, very helpful.
Yeah. Let me just pick up on Egbert's point about that text. Was the Titanic a natural disaster? Discuss it with your partner. and his suggestion that if you can give the students some language to help them discuss, then you're actually killing two birds with one stone, aren't you? You're managing to do two things at the same time. You're developing their English, but you're also meeting the geography objective, which is to read the text and think about it being a natural disaster. It's funny you should say that, Egbert, because I thought exactly the same thing. I thought, why not give the students two pieces of information which are a little bit different about the text, and then they have to talk to each other to identify the missing information. And Ola will know this type of activity from English language teaching. It's called an information gap activity, and again, I think language teachers are very familiar with this kind of thing. I think if we can share these ideas across that border between the language teaching world and the subject teaching world, you can bring communication into the subject classroom, and you can bring good content into the language classroom.
Let me just ask, Ola, are you just a language teacher or teaching to a subject?
So I don't know what's going on. I teach both. I'm a geographer and I'm a language teacher, and I do CLIL. I teach geography through English. So it's really very easy to transfer all those typical language tasks into a lesson. And for example, I would design a similar task that I would do in a language lesson, but with a content text. Yeah. That's just the same way, like, two different texts with gaps, or I would dictate a text with some obvious mistakes and get students into searching for proper things and so on. And so it's quite...
And what is your experience with teachers teaching geography in Polish? Do they...
Well, the problem is that there is quite a big concern now that if geography is taught in Polish, or generally subjects are taught in Polish, there is so much content to be taught that really, there is really and limited time, and teachers really, especially in high school, they would just tend to have lectures, I suppose, and there is very limited time generally for speaking. So if it is going to be a bilingual teaching, it's a really hard task. Either you train teachers, really train them well, or you somehow, deliver them the material that would really be designed purposely to, help the language.
I love Europe because they always do the same mistakes in different countries at the same time.
Well,
you're right.
That's amazing.
I don't know in your countries, but in the Netherlands, the education and teaching is still very much textbook driven.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you have the good textbooks, you're okay. But.
There is this but.
Textbooks are from commercial publishers. Mm-hmm. So they don't want to experiment all that much. I mean, they want to sell their books. And well, that's a terrible vicious circle, which, you don't know. I don't know how to,
I think it's a very good point that leaders made, that actually teachers like Ola, and I know Ola's a writer as well of geography material in English, they do a lot of work just making the traditional materials fit their bilingual classrooms. And the reason is that publishers still don't provide materials that are made for the bilingual kind of classroom. And when I say bilingual, I mean CLIL, because I think the bilingual world does have its own profile and its own textbook material. It's slightly different. But I mean the CLIL world, the teaching subjects through English or other languages as a foreign language.
I'm really sorry to say that, that's true, that, I would translate the Polish textbook into English, but then it would remain a traditional textbook. It's so difficult to convince a publishing house that it's not really, the way it should be done. So,
what can we do?
I'm working really now on the material that is, based on text, but with lots of different tasks for reading, listening, writing, pronunciation and so on. and I'm really prepared for hard times with my publishing house. Well, I don't know what they are going to say, but I'm quite sure they are not going to be too happy seeing it as it is.
Yeah.
But I work with a teacher who uses my material at school, and she's just so happy that she's got ready things with all the proper tasks, and that's it. But there is another thing, a very general thing. When I was still actively teaching at school, I would, maybe Keith, you remember this, I told you before, I was asked by parents why the students are not doing the textbook chapter by chapter,
Yeah.
why I'm taking them to do fieldwork that much, why do I force them, poor students, to do presentations. So
Yeah.
that was quite a big surprise, that it's not only the school system itself, not even the students, but the parents.
Yeah.
That was...
Students are never the problem. There's always teachers, students, parents.
I think, let me go back to the question. I think it was Lida asked, what can we do? Or maybe Ola said, I'm not sure what we can do. I think actually this discussion is a good step in the right direction. We're publicly saying that teachers who are teaching their subjects through the medium of a foreign language need more than what traditional textbooks provide them. And to a certain extent, we're beginning to engage publishers in this discussion. For example, publishers producing materials which teachers can edit a little bit. And
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of materials from different publishers that are like this, where you get a DVD or a CD with Word files that go with a textbook, and you can alter them. That's a step in the right direction. But I think they could do a lot more, by providing archives of images and archives of texts that teachers can adapt, maybe within an environment on a website that they can edit things and then print them off. I think we're a long way from that, but some of the publishers are going that way already.
Well, that's my question, Ola. You are translating books into English from your Polish background and from the Polish structure of education. What is your experience with books from Britain or America adapted to the Polish system? So deconstructing books from Britain or from America and then reconstructing it in the Polish way of working. Because I found in biology, the British author gives a certain amount of cultural understanding of biology, and even in geography it would be the same. And the German way to translate German books to English seems to be terrible for British people if they read this.
And what's so terrible then, Egbert?
They say the language is so scary. The examples are not really from the British or from the Anglo-American way of thinking biology, and you see it is a German biology this way, and that's astonishing for me that publishers try to translate into English, translated by German teachers of English. So,
sorry, could you tell me what German biology is then? I don't have a clue.
Yeah, if you think in terms of ecology or genetics, the German way of thinking these topics is very different from the rest of Europe. If you use certain examples or the way of how we deal with waste or such things. So it's English about a German manner of dealing with biology, and British books or American books are apart from this better in thinking biology.
Well, that's an interesting point, really, about this German biology and translated into English. That was a problem, really. to adopt British or American textbooks, because the curriculum is not the same.
Yeah.
In fact, it is so much different that it's not just that you would take, okay, this book suits me and I'll just follow it. No, you would have to really use various sources. But I don't think now, it took me some time, but now I think translating is not the most fantastic thing. But okay, you follow the curriculum, which is good.
Yeah.
But then, geography in Poland is different than geography in Britain or English-speaking countries. You've got different terms. You use different vocabulary. Sometimes some ideas are really absolutely impossible to translate. So my conclusion was that, okay, I know some teachers would use those textbooks. Some of them would even tell me that I've saved their life because they just had something. At least something to as some leading kind of material. But now I decided that it's not a good thing. This should be really a purposely written textbook. And what I'm working on, the thing that Keith mentioned, is really not the textbook that would follow the Polish curriculum. I would include, I think, a little bit more, so as the material would be possible to be used in various countries, because I believe that subject teachers are clever people and they can choose what they think is appropriate. But I would somehow deliver them, let's say, vocabulary things or written tasks or speaking tasks or other things. But there is another thing that comes to my mind, is that at least in Poland, I had a discussion with geographers who would not see themselves as language teachers at all. They would reject the idea that they would have to try and introduce reading, speaking, writing, purposely, consciously. They would say, sorry, I'm a geographer. By chance, I do it in a foreign language, but I'm not going to do grammar. I'm not going to do whatever. It's really another thing. Even if I would give those teachers a proper textbook, would they really be using it in a proper way if they are not convinced that they are language teachers as well?
Yes, but as we are not language teachers, we try to use the competencies of students that they got from their language teacher. And in that way, I'm not teaching language via biology, but I'm teaching biology using the language competence of my students, even better or more worth in one or the other case. But the student's ability of language brought from another subject to my lesson is the basis. And if they are very keen in English, it's okay. They are fluently. But if they are just able to read things, they may understand what they have in their text, but they can't express what they are thinking about this text. And at that point, I'm not teaching them the language to argue, but I'm giving them some hints and some phrases in a textbook or in a presentation to make them able to remember what they will have learned in 2 years ago in the English language lesson, and then to use it in my biology lesson.
So wouldn't you agree that in a point you are a language teacher? To a point, I mean, to a certain point, to a certain level.
Yeah,
you are a language teacher. You give your students listening. You talk. You give them opportunities to discuss things. You give them texts to read. So well, in a way, maybe not in the same way, but in a way, you are a language teacher.
Right, but the problem is that students have a different way to think about that. They say, now I'm in a biology lesson, and then I'm in a language lesson, and they do not really connect these two abilities, thinking biology and talking biology in a foreign language. That's different for students.
But Egbert, isn't that the task of the teacher?
Yeah.
Because this is my hobby horse again. I think as a chemistry teacher, you're just as much a language teacher as a chemistry teacher, even if I teach in my own language, because we have to teach him the language of chemistry in my case.
Of course, we have talked about this in the last years many times. But it's a remaining problem for teachers using foreign language in a subject lesson.
Well, this is an extra difficulty.
Yeah.
Because they have to master, to be quite fluent in English or to be comfortable in English to be able so. But, I mean, discussions and everything that you do in your chemistry lesson in your native language. Well, still, I mean, sorry to repeat it, but I think it's the same.
Yeah.
Let me draw a quick link to something that happened in England many years ago, only because I'd like to make a link to it when we write up this discussion on the website, but it is relevant. And that in the 1970s, I've just found the link, a report was written about the state of education in the UK by a man called Alan Bullock, and he focused on the fact that, and there's a quotation from him that teachers use a lot, and that is, all teachers are language teachers, no matter what subject they teach. And what he was focusing on is basically that learners fail in their basic literacy skills, in their basic kind of, reading and writing and spelling and their communication, because teachers not really ignore, they just don't think about the fact that they play an important role in improving learners' communication skills within their subjects. And I think, in a way, this is a good link back to the content pages I sent to you all, because my feeling is that geography textbook writers are very much aware of how many skills learners need when they do geography, because they do so much investigation, they do so much report writing, they do field work, they do, I mean, many areas of the curriculum also appear in geography. So maybe that's one reason why I think geographers tend to have a better sensitivity towards the demands made on their learners. I'm generalizing, I realize that, Ola, but it's certainly the impression I get from looking at geography textbooks. Whereas if you look at chemistry and physics textbooks, I think the opposite is true. I think that these science textbooks tend to assume that learners don't need to be able to listen to a teacher. They don't need to be able to develop speaking within these subjects. And again, I'm generalizing, but that's the feeling I get. And Bullock identified that and wrote a lot about it in the 70s in the UK.
Well, things are changing, especially in physics in Germany. There's a lot of material in papers and in the net that especially physics teachers try to find out what is the role of language in their teaching.
And what about your CHIC, the chemistry, a new curriculum in Germany? Do you know anything about that, Egbert?
But please repeat.
CHIC, chemistry in the context.
Yeah, of course, from the IPN. Yeah. They have 3 programs: chemistry in context, physics, and biology in context.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And we collaborate closely with the German developers. And I think I don't agree completely with what Keith said about, the science textbooks. I think the chemistry textbooks, they are not real textbooks anymore. In our higher grades, we don't actually have textbooks anymore in the new curriculum, and it's all project and very language based with, all sort of group work, presentations, and maybe not as we would like it from a language point of view, but I mean, we're making a lot of progress, I think.
Okay, that's great. One other reference I'll make a comment on is the ASE annual conference in England in January. I know of a person who's going to do a workshop at this conference about communicating in science, and the reason I mention it is because it's a very important issue for subject teachers in England dealing with children who come from a non-native speaker English background, and so it's quite a wonderful thing to have an annual conference for science teachers with a focus on language. It's a small thing, but I think it's maybe a step in the direction where we'll have, more focus on language, maybe more resources made because of this group of students, particularly in the UK, that's growing so much. But I hope also that it will come to CLIL. It'll come to the classrooms of subject teachers delivering their subjects through a foreign language. I must admit that when Lida said she disagrees with me, I do play the devil's advocate quite a lot, and I think in Holland and in Germany as well, a lot of the resources are really very good. They're very exemplary resources. But I think as a whole, the picture is still very bleak. I think there's a lot of disparity between teaching subjects in one country, very different from teaching the same subject in another. Not even talking about doing it in foreign languages. But I think as a whole, the picture is still quite bleak.